My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and yet strategic choices that all of us can make in order to become the very best version of ourselves. I'm here in the studio today with Dr. Shawn Cramer, who has studied for many, many years the art of leadership. And what he shares with us today in our conversation is that you cannot be a great leader. You cannot be a productive human being. You cannot be the best version of yourself if you're always distracted. The conversation that we have together is illuminating, it's inspiring, because we're going to dig deeply into how to eliminate the distractions in our life. As well, we're going to talk about why not to blame those things, but to actually own the fact that the distractions we have in our lives, we've actually invited to be there. So we have the power to push them out, to draw boundaries, to design our week, and to actually live a life where we can do deep work, have significant self-reflection, and truly become the very, very best version of ourselves, personally and professionally, by eliminating distractions. I hope you enjoy this episode. Shawn, it's great to have you here in the studio today to talk about these 3 words.
Eliminate the distractions.
So, Dr. Cramer, I'm just curious, is that even possible in today's culture to eliminate distractions from our life?
Yeah, great question. It makes me think, have you ever gotten to the end of your week and said, what did I even accomplish? I get this all the time. I did some things, but what did I even do that had anything of value?
Right.
Because we are so distracted.
Yeah, I would agree. So what happens typically is we go from thing to thing, in appointment to appointment, or social media page to social media page, to TV show, to this conversation, and we just don't. Now, again, I think very, very favorably toward designing your week to make sure that you're actually removing some of those distractions. But many people that we work with, obviously as life coaches, as consultants, if you get to some of the core issues as to why they're not achieving the things they want to, if they're honest, if they're reflective enough, they're going to say, I'm just so distracted. I thought I would get that done. I set out to do that thing, and I didn't.
Some of the reasons that we are so distracted is because these technologies are actually really new, and we've been really reactive instead of proactive about them. And so especially with COVID, one thing that did with some people working at home, or most of us working from home, is the fact that we feel like we have to be available all the time. I can't tell you how many times I'm checking my email at times at night, right before I go to bed. Why would I do that?
Well, and I think also multitasking. There's this idea that we should champion multitasking. In fact, if you've been pursuing a job in the last couple of years, oftentimes there's a question asked as a part of that interview process that goes something like this. How good are you at multitasking? And can you give some examples of how you can multitask? And I never ask that question in an interviewing process because I'm not interested. I don't think we should be multitasking. I want someone who does one task at a time well, not 10 tasks at a time over the course of an hour, subpar.
Absolutely. And that's heightened by COVID too. How many tabs do we have open? The phone's here, the Zoom call's here, and the next tab's open with something that we're doing there. And so we have to, as we're coming out of the pandemic, we have to reclaim the idea of working deep and substantive work. There's no substitution for it.
Yeah, doing deep work, actually, we talked about that possibility even to be the title for this conversation, because you and I obviously both achieved doctoral degrees. Both of us would acknowledge, we've talked about this off camera, that had we not eliminated distractions from our life, had we not designed our weeks, had we not put our phones away from time to time, we would have never accomplished one of the greatest feats in our life. It is so hard to think about things that deeply, to do the deep work when there's all these distractions around us. But I also want to do this. I want us to acknowledge and even encourage our listeners and viewers to not refer to distractions just as circumstances, but actually realize that our distractions are our choices. See, if distractions are all out here, where we have no responsibility, the social media, we start blaming things and pointing to this or that, well, I can put my phone in a drawer. I can turn off my email dings. I can actually make choices that actually keep distractions out here and not say, well, they're just creeping in. Now, there's, like you said, there's temptations to actually do that. But at the end of the day, I get to make a decision. The distractions don't decide. I do. I'm going to pause right here in the middle of this episode to simply invite you to subscribe to our monthly DMB coaching newsletter. You can actually sign up at dmbcoaching.com. Now back to the episode.
I think that's fantastic. And really, all of our decisions we make are a combination of being proactive and then what do we do in those moments that we need to react. The most proactive thing I can think people can do is to have a relationship with their email. I know that many people, that's the first thing that they do is check that. I'm also might put social media in that as well. But the most proactive thing one can do is decide what's one thing that I want to move forward this week and then block that time out on the calendar. And then we have to fight like dogs for that time.
I agree. And I would also say that our morning and our evening rituals, our morning and our before bedtime routines should be an undistracted time. So for me, my phone is in my drawer. It is near me if I ever want to reach for it and grab it, but I don't want to touch the phone for at least 10 to 15 minutes of the beginning of my day because there's a certain other things that I'm going to go through, whether it's push-ups or hydration or just even reflection, gratitude. I like to wake up and to say, I'm here, and just kind of be for a minute. I don't want to go right to my phone. So I think there's distractions that will kind of try to creep in, but we need to really protect, particularly, Shawn, those morning routines, those before bedtime rituals, because a lot of those things are going to affect our sleep, our well-being, our sense of creativity, our sense of productivity throughout the day. You can't be productive. You mentioned it early on in our conversation. You absolutely cannot have a truly productive week if you're responding to every ding on your phone. If you are responding to every email, as you said, the moment it hits your inbox. We're not going to be able to do the deep work. We're not going to be able to achieve the outcomes. Now, I would say this, it probably feels good to have an inbox that's empty. It probably feels good to kind of scroll through and say, oh, you've seen everything that's there. I've only done that occasionally where it's like, oh, you've seen everything. It's like, oh, ever seen everything in my reel or in my, I don't know what that is, my stories. But typically we don't need to. If you did that all the time, you can't do deep work. You're not going to be productive and you're not going to become the best version of yourself.
Michael, I'm glad you mentioned the phrase, it feels good, because I think email is like the sugar of our work life. So sugar gives us a high for a little bit and then we crash. And that sense of accomplishing little things along the way gives us that quick hit that we're accomplishing what needs to be done. But then we know, that's why I use the phrase when we get to the end of our week. So when we step back and analyze what we've done, email isn't going to cut it. Small things aren't going to cut it. We have to move significant things forward, and that only happens by living a life undistracted. Honestly, you mentioned your relationship with your phone at night. That's probably the one singular decision that's changed my life more than anything in the last 3 years, is charging my phone in the kitchen. So I don't have that. The last thing I'm seeing isn't the blue light. You're right, it's connected to sleep. But all of our 12 dimensions of our life that we talk about with DMB coaching are so connected. So I've set myself up by putting it in the other room, having a great night's sleep, waking up at the same time every morning, having that morning ritual, and moving something forward significant. That's my time of deep work, 5:30 to 7. Everyone's different. You did your doctoral work in the evening. That's fine. I'm not going to prescribe it for others. But for me, that making in the morning was a ritual that I wanted to be about. And so right now, that is about creative problem solving. I take the biggest problem that I'm going after, and I give it as much time as I can, undistracted.
Yeah, there's actually an idea out there, and I forget who wrote the book. It's called Eat the Frog, which basically says you do those hardest things when you have the most energy, the most focus, and the most clarity, i.e. less distracted.
Yeah, and it's contagious. People want to know, how are you doing this? How are you getting this done? Especially if at the end of that session, I do email it. How'd you get that done before 7? Well, it makes me come alive because we were all created to move something forward, to make a difference. And so when we, over time, it's this virtuous cycle. Over time, we see the significant breakthrough, and we want to do that more and more.
So, Dr. Cramer, I'm guessing you have very practical steps to be able to kind of remove distractions or to eliminate distractions from your life. So I'm going to share one and then just see what you have to share with us as we kind of wrap up this conversation. But the one that hits me at the top of my consciousness, even as we think about this, is episode 71 of 3 Words Podcast, Design Each Day. Because if you really take some time at the beginning of your week to actually design the 168 hours. Now, you don't need to fill every single slot of that 168 hours. But if you take those things that are most priority, if you take that deep work that you keep talking about, put them in a calendar at a specific time for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, even 15 minutes. And during that time, actually say, this is what I'm going to do no matter what. I shut my door, I put my phone away, I silence my email, and I'm going to do this thing that I've prescribed to do in advance at this time, And that is how I think we eliminate distractions. Because any decisions we make proactively always tend to be better than those decisions we make spontaneously or reactively. Thoughts about that?
I think that's fantastic. I'd like to focus in on our relationship with our phone. There's so many simple things that we can do with that. One, like you mentioned, set a timer for my deep work. And I want to meet people where they're at. It doesn't have to be 2 hours in the morning. You're right. We can get a lot done with 15 minutes. Set a timer, put the phone away, and when that goes off, then you can engage with whatever you'd like to do again. Turn off all notifications except those that you must have. There is a do not disturb feature that's just perfect. All of my favorite contacts can still call me and it goes through. So I know those that would need to reach me for emergency can come through. And here's the other one. Unsubscribe from everything except that which is adding value to your life consistently. And let's have some integrity. That includes our newsletter with DMB Coaching. We're doing our best that it would add value, but we have to unsubscribe from everything that's not adding value to us regularly.
Because again, if we don't do that, we will always be distracted because there's something that's going to demand your attention, something that's going to say, hey, look here. I mean, from the minute you, even taking those long car drives, we could be using that time to reflect and to create and to design and to even speak to those significant people in our lives, right? We can make a phone call, billboard after billboard after billboard. You know, is the radio on full blast or can we turn it off? Are you okay without the radio on or music on for 5 minutes? It's so interesting to me, even walking across a college campus. Or even recently I was in LA, walking through LA and realizing there's so much distraction in one small area. For instance, I'm watching folks who have a phone in one hand, an AirPod in their ear, and then a cup of coffee, and they're trying to have conversations while listening to music and checking their phone. How can we be fully present? We've talked a lot about that in 3 Words Podcast, the ability to be fully present, to be right here and now. But we're usually distracted by something, whether it's the past or the future, whether we're wondering or worrying, or even in the present. The only thing that we're guaranteed, we have all these distractions pressing in on us. But remember, we get to choose whether or not we allow them, whether we invite them in. It's not our fault if a bird lands on our head, but it becomes our fault if we allow that bird to build a nest. So we might be tempted by distractions, but then do we allow them to take and build a nest within our lives?
Fantastic. The future will go to those who can remain present. The future will go to those who can remain present and be productive in their life.
I love that. What a great place to end our conversation. Obviously, if you're listening or watching and you're thinking to yourself, I am so distracted, I have no idea where to go next or what to do, and I've tried so hard, reach out to us here at 3 Words Podcast. Reach out to us at DMB Coaching. We would love to assist you in your journey. Dr. Cramer, always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Love it.
For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.